Hi everyone. I hope everyone's in the conference so far. Do you guys enjoy the coffee break? Everyone got their snacks? Everything cool? Great. So now let's go to the part. Developer experience. For the past few years, we've been talking more and more about developer experience as it is something new, but we've been reflecting a little bit about that. Is it really something new? So before, we used to use punch cards in order to record data. And if you never heard of it, was literally physical cards where you punch the holes in specific orders in order to save the data. But later, magnetic storage came into each place. And it evolved quite a lot the previous method. It was much cheaper, much faster, was less prone to errors, and so on. The next example is the way that we write software. So before we used to need a combination of a couple of tools like the text editors, compiler, a linker, so on, in order to write software. But then these came to place, and it kind of combined every single tool under the same interface. It's quite old, yes. But I imagine that was quite a relief for all the developers at the time.
Let's switch to the 20s. Who recognize this? How many of you have tried bootstrapping a LAMP step locally? I, I tried years ago, but I couldn't succeed without the help of such software, which basically bootstrap and run the entire stack for you with just a bunch of clicks. All these examples for saying that developer experience has been always within us. Time changed, technology changed, and so developer experience changed. Always trying to solve the problem we struggle with. And what about today? What do we struggle with? Let's go with a practical example of a person founding a new product, a new startup. So you might start from your laptop, building like a prototype, just to showcase your product to some potential investors or customers. And you validate your idea. Once you have validated your idea, you might want to deploy your software in the cloud, maybe buying a virtual machine. With a virtual machine, you need a place where to persist your data, so you might buy a managed database, and at a certain point, you would like to keep track of the changes that you make to your code. So you might switch to a version control system such as Git just to store your code. Now your code is in a repository, and I mean, deploying your code manually, every time you make a change, it's painful. So you onboard a new CI/CD tool. Your team grows, and you will need a place where to manage all the work. So you onboard a ticketing system, a place where to store your documentation, some good messaging tools, and at a certain point, your customers grow, and so your load on your service will grow. So you start splitting your monolithic application into microservice, maybe onboarding a new container orchestration tool. Now your software, your organization has like a bunch of repositories, databases, services, and probably the data that was stored in a single database now is split within multiple databases because you need to better scale out the system. And at a certain point, I mean, this infrastructure is now big enough that you need a better way to manage your infrastructure. So why not onboarding a new infrastructure as a code tool? Because this is going to be mandatory. And since your customers are important, you decide to invest on reliability, onboarding metrics, logging, and alerting tools. I'll stop here, but I hope you got the picture. To me, this looks like a mess. The problem is that building software today is hard. And it's hard because the software we build today is more complex than the software that we built 30 years ago or 20 years ago. And in order to build such software, you need to onboard different tools, different frameworks, different languages into your organization. And onboarding all these tools into your organization will lead to fragmentation. And fragmentation is a big beast because it's what slowed engineers down. Having to navigate through all these tools in order to get the information you need or perform the action you need to perform, this is really a problem. And many years ago at Spotify, we faced this problem. In 2016, we were growing a lot. We were hiring a lot of people. And as we hired a lot of people, we noticed that onboarding new people was becoming harder, to the point that new people, on average, they were shipping like a single pull request per week. But I think it's an acceptable number. And the problem wasn't also only affecting new joiners, but was also affecting experienced engineers, because context switching between all these tools was killing them. So how did we solve it? We solved by creating Backstage, which was our own internal developer portal. And we created Backstage to reduce the complexity that engineers face every day, which at the end of the story will translate into saving money.
So, in case you don't know what a developer portal is, it's basically a way to aggregate all the different tools from your infrastructure under the same front end. So it reduces a little bit this context switching and everything. So ideally, you would search for a topic and it would show what tools, what repositories, what services are available for that, regarding of where each individual components are actually running or who manages them. So if you don't have a developer portal within your organization, most likely when you have to do a simple task, but that involves many tools, your browser most likely will look like this. Many, many, many tabs open, like far too many, one for each tool, and you most probably spend more time trying to figure out how each of those interfaces work instead of actually doing the task itself. When in fact, it could look like something like this. That is just the code, if you even want to, and the developer portal itself, where you can execute all of those tasks. Now, as mentioned before, at Spotify, we created our own developer portal. But when we were analyzing the market, we realized that there was no one offering that solution, so we thought that's an opportunity. So we rewrote everything and transformed it into a framework called Backstage. And in March 2020, we open sourced it and donated it to the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. Now, when we talk about developer portals, there are three main jobs to be done: create, manage, and explore. And when we talk about create, it should be as simple as a click of a button. I'm going to show a quick video, but because I'm not brave enough for live demos, but Vincenzo after will do a live demo. So you click on create, select new component, and there you should be able to see many templates. It can be a Spring Boot application, a React, a Next.js. You choose what suits to you. Then you fill it up some details, for example, the component name and description. Every single step is like customizable for your template, so most likely, if you're gonna implement yourself, you're gonna look different from what you're seeing. So you define the ownership, the configuration. In Spotify, we use GCP, so here we are configuring the GCP project, and so on. So Kubernetes names, CPU requests. Some values can be pre-filled in case your organization has some default. So here we review. If everything is great, you click create, and then Backstage will fetch the template, will create the code and the repository for you, and spin up the CI/CD pipeline. And also it's going to deploy your service where you declared on the steps. So here, it's building up. And once it's done and everything is green, you already can navigate to the repository itself, where you can see the code, like bootstrap it for you with the boilerplate. Or you can also go to the Backstage itself, where you can see the service page. From there, you have access to many tools already and shortcuts. So you can see who owns the service, or you can see the CI/CDs, all the builds that was previously started. The second one would be manage. So the manage is the ability for an engineer to manage the service from the single place. So basically click the build for that service within Backstage itself. And explore, which in simple words would be the ability for you to identify other services across your organization that might be interested to you. So it reduces the code duplication, like work around work situation, and also incentivize the collaboration across squads, for example. And, well, how can we fit everything under the same interface? Well, that comes from our plugin architecture. So when we were building Backstage, we knew that we couldn't have a central place that dictated from top down what should be done. So we built it Backstage on top of this plugin architecture to allow everyone to contribute. And a plugin is most likely, it relates to your company itself. So each Backstage instance has a different set of plugins. And they can come from anywhere. Can come from the open source plugin marketplace, or can come from an internal squad that is willing to improve that process. And it can be extended from the front-end perspective, back-end, can be very tied up to your architecture, so a plugin that is going to work for your company, or it can be a common problem across organizations, and then you can open source it.
And now, let's go with a live demo of Backstage.
Good luck.
So, first of all, this is how you create a new Backstage app. You run this command, and this script will basically create a new repository on your machine containing a Node backend application and a React front-end application. These are basically the two main technologies that Backstage use. And once you start locally your project, this is how it looks. So this instance, it has already some data. It's filling in with some data just to let you easily explore the instance. And it contains some plugins just for demo purposes. So what you're seeing right now, this is Software Catalog. Software Catalog is one of the core plugins of Backstage. It's a plugin that lets you ingest entities, which can be software entities, components, for example, services, websites, libraries, and so on. You can ingest, you can track APIs, resources, such as databases, message queues. It's up to you how granular you want to go. And another thing you can ingest are organizational data. So, for example, users, groups, such as teams, departments, and so on. And through this interface, you can explore your entire infrastructure easily. And now, let's imagine that, for example, I'm working on one of my services, and suddenly I discover that my service calls another service I didn't know anything about. So if you want to know, let's imagine that it's one of these components you see here, for example, artist lookup. So if I want to know more about artist lookup, I don't have to go to Slack, spam like 10 different groups just to understand what this component is doing or who owns it. I can just go to Backstage, search for the component, and then press it, and then you go in a page where you have the details about the component. You have all the tools integrated here, CI/CD tool, APIs, dependencies, and so on. I can check all the metadata about the component. So description, the type of the component, this is a service. Most likely it's a Java service since it contains a Java tag. I can check the owner, with the team who owns this component, together with extra information. You can customize this as you want. And another cool thing is that you can check where your component sits on your entire infrastructure. So you can, in this case, artist lookup depends on a database called ArtistDB. And there is another service, most likely it's a website, www.artist, which consumes data from artist lookup. So you can basically see where a specific component actually sits in your entire organization. And now let's imagine that I want to know more about I want to reach out to the team who owns this component. To do that, you just press the owner, and then you land on a page with the details of the team, showing you like some information about how to reach out to the team, emails, Slack channels, and so on. You can check all the services that the team owns, so services, APIs, and so on. And you can see all the members directly here, so that you can basically reach out easily to them. And components, services usually can expose API. And the cool thing about Backstage is that you can ingest the API definition of a service directly in Backstage. This means that if you do that, you can explore the APIs directly from here. You can invoke the endpoints directly from here without trying to see where your service is deployed, try to find where the Swagger page is. You can do it directly from here without leaving Backstage. And you can extend the functionality of Backstage by installing plugins. Right now, we have a couple of them installed for demo purposes. TechRadar is one of them. It's a plugin that lets you track all the technology that you use at your company. And Cost Insight is another one, which lets you track the cloud cost for your organization. But as I said, you can extend the functionality of Backstage by installing plugins, so you can customize this as you want. So this was a quick overview about what Backstage open source can give you, what you can get for free when you create a new Backstage app. And now I would like to inspire you today, because we want to show what we achieved internally at Spotify with Backstage by showing you our own internal instance. Here it is. This is Backstage open source, customized with over 250 plugins that we have developed during the years. It looks different because we have customized the homepage. We have some recently visited item at the top, some squad like metrics, such as vulnerabilities, together with all the tools that we use internally. We have a lot here. There is data plugin, machine learning plugin, but I want to focus on the manage section. The manage section is where we manage the software that we own. So what we're seeing right now are metrics and ownership about services that my team owns. So you can see some basic metric about cost insights, security issues, metadata issues, all the services that my team owns, and so on. Now let me open one of them, for example, a website. Hold on. Yes, here it is. This one, for example. So this is this component. It's basically this website. Probably some of you already jump into this fabric. It's backstage.spotify.com. This is a website that everyone can browse. And this is how it looks in Backstage internally. So you see, it looks very similar to Backstage open source, but it's filled in, the interface is filled in with more information. So you have the metadata as the open source version, all the tools that we use integrated here. We have a lot of things, like PagerDuty integration, showing you if there is any incident, the person who is on call, and so on. Let me try to go visit some of these integrations. For example, the CI/CD integration. Here, I can check all the builds for my software. You can see some of them are passed, some of them are failed. If you want to know, for example, why this specific build has failed, you just press it, and you go into the detail of the build, showing you all the steps and all the logs with the error where it failed. So in order to understand why a specific build has failed, you don't have to try to go to your CI/CD tool, try to find the service, try to find the build, and then from your build, you jump into your cloud log provider. You can do everything, check everything here from Backstage without leaving Backstage. We have a lot of things here. For example, code coverage, showing you how the code coverage will look under the time. Deployment. This is very customized on Kubernetes, since it's the tool that we use internally for deploying Backstage. And here you can see the build that is currently deployed in production. So this is a build, and this is the one that is deployed to production. I can check all the pods. We have 2 green healthy pods running in Asia, 2 in Europe and 2 in the US. And I can also connect to the pods directly from here. So you don't have to open kubectl just to establish a connection and check the logs. And you can also check all the previous builds. So, for example, if there is, if you have released a bug and you want to roll back to a previous version, the only thing you have to do is find the build you want to deploy, press this button, and then Backstage will communicate with our CI/CD tool, which will take care about deploying the selected version in production. What else? I think this is my favorite. This is Soundcheck. This is one of the plugins that is present in our commercial bundle that we released 2 years ago. And it's a plugin that helps your engineers to follow your best practice. Let me try to be more specific. So this component he got this beautiful L1 test certified for web badge. And the reason for that is that these checks are passing. So continuous build is configured, service level indicator are defined, and so on. But it's not test certified level 2 because some of these other checks are missing. So coverage is not in healthy state. But once you fix it, then you will get the badge. So it's a kind of gamified way to force your engineer to follow your best practices. And at the end, you can also get like a matrix with all the components just to see how they are performing. We have a lot here. For example, augmentation, where you could create new, CNAME records directly from Backstage, and so on. But we don't have so much time, so I want to just show one last thing. Documentation. This is important because documentation is also attached to your code. This is thanks to TechDocs, which is one of the core plugins of Backstage, which is a plugin which lets you treat documentation as code. So you write documentation in a Markdown file on the side of your code in your repository, and then Backstage will basically fetch the documentation and present it in the same entity page together with all the other tools. So this was a quick overview. We have a lot here, like data plugin, machine learning plugins. Unfortunately, we don't have so much time, so I have to go back to the slide, saying that I hope you got a picture about what Backstage gives you. But the create, manage, and explore use case that you get for free with a developer portal, these are just the beginning. There are more problems out there, from context switching to security updates, incident management, and so on. We all face the same problem, no matter how big your organization here is. Having a developer portal will give your engineer a place where they can experiment, creating tools for solving the problems that matter for your organization. They can create these tools directly in the developer portal without creating like sparse scripts or web application or bots that nobody can find it. And we collected a bunch of examples just to give you an idea about some problems that we have actually solved.
Yeah, so this one is one that we faced in the zone, actually. So my previous experience at the DX team that Chirpo mentioned. So at the DX team, we had another way to see the pull requests, because the way that platforms like a GitHub or Bitbucket presents the pull requests is quite tricky if your squad owns many repositories, right? It's like they show the pull requests per repository, which means that you need to have a tab for each repository, keep track of that. Pull requests tends to pile up, or the worst case, in my opinion, is when you develop the solution and then it becomes stale because it took so much time to merge it that the code doesn't really make sense anymore. It also might increase some tech debt because all those bump pull requests stays left behind. So how can I get developers to review the pull requests more effectively? Well, in the zone, we had like a platform, like a page where we could see all the pull requests open for that squad, for that team. But once we adopted Backstage, we brought this idea to Backstage. And here is how it looks like. So the first column is the review required. So it's all the pull requests that are open for that squad. And it didn't have any interaction yet. The second one is reviewing progress, which it has some interactions. So some comments, some requests for change. So it's in progress, so you don't have to worry that much. And approve it is when your pull request reached all the checks that your repository requires to be merged. So in this one, I think was 2 approvals or sometimes 1, depending on the repository. And I have great news. So if you like it, this idea and this approach, this plugin is open source on the Backstage community. You can find under the plugin GitHub pull request board in npm.js.
Another problem we want to mention that we have solved is related to something that we struggle with internally at Spotify. So you might know at Spotify we're thousands of engineers working all the time, building software, pushing new code all the time. And what's the problem there? The problem is that the software where we work is not all the same. There is a particular software which is kind of different. I'm talking about the mobile apps and the web client application. Why they are different? They are different because the code base is huge and building takes a lot of time. It might take like 30 minutes to build the app. So the problem is that our code, whenever we push something, we have a CI/CD system which basically takes our code, runs some tests, and builds it. And in case there are a lot of engineers working, it might happen that no agent is available at that specific time. So this means like an extra waiting time for your engineers. And the team who owns the CI system was struggling with, and of course, they need to come up with a solution because like they need to provide something to the customers. And let's be honest, this is not like is a classical problem which you can solve in one day. So what did they come up with? They came up with a Backstage plugin that show you how the weather looks today on your CI agent. So you have a forecast about the load on the agent. So for example, between 0 and 3, there is a lot of load, but between 3 and 12, you should be fine to build software, you should be fine to find a machine, and this helps your engineer to better plan their work. And together with that, we also have some metrics about like some agents available, divided by category and so on, together with a pull request waiting room to spot some builds that maybe got stuck. So I found that this is really brilliant because it's like it translates a complex problem into something really simple that everyone could understand. And I'm sure that having a developer portal has helped the team building this plugin to come up with this idea. Because at the end of the day, having a developer portal will unlock your engineer's creativity.
So, quick tips if you would like to kickstart your own developer portal. So the first one is start small. So we don't want to solve all the problems in the world in one go, right? So we need to start small and strategic. So think about a problem, and try to a small problem that is impactful as well, and try to develop upon that. The second one is build your internal developer portal in a distributed way. So that is also one of the core values of Backstage. We don't want a central team that dictates from top down. Use the plugin architecture on your advantage, and that is going to be much more flexible to adopt and much faster. The team that is closer to the problem should provide the solution. So you most likely will not run into resource constraint, or one single team cannot have the solution for every single problem, right?
And then next tip, very important, is that Backstage is not a replacement for the tool you are using today. We want you to still using the tools that you use today. Instead, try to see Backstage as a software that collects information from different tools and presents it in a centralized way. Backstage is really rarely the source of truth. Try to see it more as an aggregator. And last but not least, if you're pretty sold about building a developer portal for your company, that's great. I think you're going to benefit a lot. But please, 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 big advice, don't go on your own. Use Backstage. Because if you use Backstage, you're going to be part of a big community. We have 26,000 stars, like 1,800 contributors to the project. And we have a Discord server with 13,000 members, really happy to help you in case you have some problems. And this is the number of companies that have adopted Backstage. We counted 2,200 companies that have used Backstage for bootstrapping the developer portal. And this is just companies we are aware of.
So now, after all the slides and funny memes that I personally chosen, we are curious to see your solution. So which DX problem you would like to solve and bring to Backstage? So join the Backstage community. You can scan this QR code and you're going to be forwarded to Backstage page. We also have meetings every month for adopters and tech sessions. So join us on those as well. And thank you very much. I hope you guys like it. Leave us a good review as well. And yes.
Thank you so much. So, surprisingly, we have 5 minutes for questions.
Woohoo!
Who has a question for Talita? No, I'm sorry. Let's skip you. I'm gonna go in there.
Thank you, guys. I'm missing a part here, specifically related to discovery of services. At the beginning, you have shown the list of services tracked in Backstage. What do you actually need to do in order to track the services? Is there like some metadata you manually need to add? Is something automatically discovers the services and their relations? Just asking that.
Yeah, it's a great question.
AI, it's AI for sure, right?
No, it's not yet, but hope it's going to stay as it is. So what you have to do, there are many ways of doing this. The recommended way, in case you don't have already a software catalog, would be to store on your repository a file called, by default is called service-info.yaml, and catalog-info.yaml, and that file will contain all the metadata about your service. This is the easy way. And then there are some tools on Backstage which already crawl your entire GitHub and scan your code, find this piece, and basically populate your catalog. So you don't have to manually insert it. And they keep the data updated. This is the default one, but in case you have already a catalog, of course, many companies, they don't want to recreate manually all these files. So there is another way where you could basically customize Backstage to fetch your data from a source that you decide, and that data is going to be ingested in Backstage. So Backstage, as I said, is not the source of truth. The source of truth is your file. Then Backstage, eventually the data is going to be ingested in Backstage. Hope that clarifies your question. You're welcome.
Cool. Any other question?
I'm happy to go last. So, challenging question for you guys. So, great talk, by the way. So, dreaming about the future, what do you think, what is your immediate thought about being Backstage in 3 years from now? Or something that you would like to see in Backstage that you don't see yet? Or the dream that you have for this?
This is, it's a great question. I guess it goes on our product direction to make sure that make everything simpler. Right now, in order to, I'm talking about, for example, building a plugin. In order to building a plugin, you need to know React, how React works, or like JavaScript works. And I think our direction is to go into a place where anyone could customize their instance without knowing how to code. I think this is where we want to go. So no knowledge required, and anyone can kind of customize or build their developer portal on top of Backstage in an easier way.
One more question.
Yeah, we have one more question.
Hi. I wonder how big is the team that maintains not the software itself, but the installation that Spotify has, you know, keeping up to date all the plugins and all that kind of stuff.
I can answer that one.
Go for it.
So from Spotify, we have like only one team that takes care of the core, and it's about from 4 to 6 people that manages it. Then all the plugins that we have internally, which is over 250, is managed by the teams that owns the problem. So before I used to work in a team that create plugins at internal Spotify to analyze performance from all the apps, and the team was about 10 people, but the Backstage side of that team was only 2. So it really depends how you're going to manage and how you're going to use the plugin architecture on your advantage. So as we mentioned, one of our core values is to not create a central one that do everything. So keep that in mind.
Cool. I would like to add something as well, if you don't mind. I think the key success of Backstage is if it's a platform that is going to be adopted by everyone in the company and people are building on top of it, as you said. So if you are thinking about having a team that will build everything on Backstage, it will never be a success.
Yeah.
Of course, you need the ownership, you need someone that maintains the platform, but you need people to contribute to that platform.
Yeah, but just evangelize it Backstage within your company, and if you have only a central team, you're most likely going to run into resources constraints. So keeping that in mind.
Cool. Thank you so much. And yeah, what's that?
Give us feedback.
Give them feedback, please. Cool. Thank you so much.
Thank you.